Okay, let's talk about something that can definitely cause some sleepless nights for UK taxpayers. That moment you realize you might have made a mistake with your tax, or maybe, even more worrying, you get a letter from HMRC. This discussion today, which dives into a key way to handle exactly that, was arranged by ProTax Accountant. They're a firm that helps people navigate these kinds of situations.
That's right.
And the main tool we're looking at is HMRC's Digital Disclosure Service, or DDS as it's often called. Basically, think of it as HMRC's official online route for people, individuals, businesses, trustees to voluntarily fix past unpaid tax. We're talking things like income tax, capital gains, corporation tax. It's meant to give you a clear path to get things, back on track. And it's clearly something a lot of people are using. The
Yep.
figures we looked at show HMRC recovered, wow, 320 million just through DDS in 2024. That was across 140,000 separate disclosures.
Huge numbers.
What really struck me, though, was the average disclosure amount about £12,500. That suggests it's not just for massive tax issues, right? It's for ordinary people with errors that still need sorting.
Exactly. It covers a whole range of situations, and probably the biggest reason to use DDS, well, it's peace of mind, frankly, and avoiding really harsh consequences. If you come forward voluntarily using the DDS, you sidestep the worst penalties HMRC can impose. Those can be like 100% of the tax you owe, even 200% if it involves offshore income.
Wow.
But maybe the most telling statistic is this. In 2024, absolutely zero criminal prosecutions were launched against people who use DDS. Compare that to 200 cases HMRC started against those who didn't disclose.
Zero. That's it. That's incredibly significant.
Yeah.
It really hammers home the benefit of being proactive, especially, I gather, if your disclosure is unprompted. What does that mean exactly?
Right. Unprompted means you tell HMRC about the issue before they've specifically contacted you about it, maybe through an investigation or a targeted letter about that particular income.
And doing it unprompted makes a big difference to penalties.
It really does. We saw that unprompted disclosures can cut penalties by up to 35%. Looking across everyone who used it last year, that added up to a collective saving of 50 million just on penalties.
£50 million saved by taxpayers just by coming forward first. That's quite something.
It is. Of course, you still have to pay interest on the tax that was late. The rate was around 3.25% as of April 2025, so sorting it out sooner rather than later cuts down that cost too.
Okay, so who typically needs to use this service? And what sets HMRC off? How do they find out about these things?
Oh, it's a real mix. People who maybe didn't declare income from freelancing, side jobs. Landlords are a big one, undeclared rental income. There's actually a specific campaign linked to DDS for that, the Let Property campaign.
Ah, right.
Then there's capital gains, selling assets like a second property, shares, and increasingly crypto assets. Businesses use it for corporation tax errors too. Often the trigger these days is one of HMRC's nudge letters.
Nudge letters.
Yeah, they basically prompt you to check your tax affairs for a specific area. We saw a 20% jump in those in 2024, about 200,000 sent out. They often focus on things like rental income or crypto, areas HMRC is targeting.
And how does HMRC know who to send these nudge letters to? It feels a bit like they have a crystal ball sometimes.
Well, not quite a crystal ball, but they have something called the Connect system. Think of it as a really powerful computer system that cross-references huge amounts of data. It pulls info from like 28 different sources, land registry, banks, company's house, even oversees data agreements. It matches that against your tax record, and if it sees a mismatch, well, that can trigger a nudge letter or a closer look.
Okay, so Connect is pretty sophisticated then. So if you get a nudge letter, or even if you just realize yourself you've made an error, DDS is the way to go. Can you walk me through the basic steps? How does it actually work?
Sure. First step, check DDS actually covers the tax you need to correct. It covers most things, income tax, CGT, CT, but not VAT, for example. Then you log in through the gov.uk website using your government gateway ID. That's standard stuff. The really key next step is formally notifying HMRC you intend to make a disclosure. You do this using the DDS online form. This gets you a unique reference number, and crucially, it starts a 90-day countdown.
90 days to do everything. That sounds
Wow.
quite tight.
It goes very quickly. Within those 90 days, you absolutely have to gather all your records, bank statements, invoices, crypto transaction logs, sale documents, whatever proves the figures. Then you calculate the total amount due. And this is important. It's the unpaid tax itself, plus the interest and the penalty. All three.
Okay, the penalty part. You mentioned it could be lower for unprompted disclosures, maybe 20% to 70%. How do they decide where you fall in that range?
Good question. It really depends on why the error happened, your behavior. So for an unprompted disclosure, if it was just careless, you made a genuine mistake, the penalty is usually lowest, maybe 20% to 30%. If it was deliberate, you knew you should have paid but didn't actively hide it, it's more like 30% to 50%. But if it was deliberate and concealed, you knew and took steps to cover it up, even coming forward unprompted, the penalty is higher. It could be 50% up to 70%. How much you cooperate during the disclosure also plays a part in where you land in those ranges.
Right, that makes sense. Behavior matters. Let's make this concrete. The material mentioned an example, someone called Priya.
Ah, yes, Priya, the graphic designer. So she had about £15,000 in freelance income she hadn't declared over a period. Let's say the tax on that was £3,000. She got a nudge letter, realized she needed to act, and used DDS. She calculated the £3,000 tax plus interest, say, £292.50, using that April 2025 rate. And because it was deemed careless and she came forward after the nudge, which counts as prompted for penalty calculation, but still better than waiting for an investigation. Let's say her penalty was calculated at maybe 30%. No, the example used 20%, assuming unprompted, careless before the nudge. Let's stick with that for simplicity. So 20% penalty.
Just £600 penalty.
Exactly, £600 penalty, making her total £3,000 tax plus £292.50 interest plus £600 penalty plus £3,892.50. Now, if she'd ignored it and HMRC had launched a full investigation, that penalty could easily have been much higher, plus more stress and hassle.
That really shows the value of using the system properly. But it sounds like people do make mistakes during the process itself. What are the common traps?
Yes, definitely pitfalls to avoid. A major one highlighted was underreporting. So people declare some missed income, but not all of it. Apparently, that was why 30% of DDS submissions got rejected last year. They just weren't complete.
Right, you have to declare everything.
Absolutely. Another common mistake is calculating the tax but forgetting the interest and penalties. You must include all three parts in your calculation and offer. Missing the 90-day deadline is another big one. About 5,000 taxpayers tripped up on that last year, which often means higher penalties later.
Ouch.
And finally, poor records. If you can't back up your figures, HMRC might reject the disclosure. About 2,500 cases were rejected for that reason. Accuracy and having the evidence are key.
Okay, so you managed to get everything together, calculate carefully, submit within 90 days. What happens then?
Yeah.
Does HMRC just rubber stamp it?
They review it first. They check for, obvious errors, completeness, whether the calculations seem reasonable. The good news is that acceptance rates are high. 92% were accepted in 2024 without major issues. That review usually takes about 30 to 60 days. If it's accepted, you'll get a letter confirming it, usually with a 30-day deadline to pay the amount you calculated.
And if they do have questions?
That can happen. About 11,200 cases needed clarification last year. Often it's missing evidence or maybe a slight miscalculation. The key is just to respond quickly and clearly to their questions. Keeping things moving helps keep your penalty level down.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What if the final amount is, more than you can afford to pay in one go within 30 days?
HMRC does have options there. They offer time-to-pay arrangements. These helped about 15,000 DDS users last year. You can usually spread the payments over, say, 3 to 12 months. For amounts under £50,000, the approval rate was really high, 95%. So it's a genuinely helpful option for many.
That's reassuring. This whole process, though, the deadlines, the calculations, potential penalties, needing good records, it sounds like it could get quite complex. Where does getting professional help, like from a tax accountant, fit into all this?
Well, the data suggests it makes a significant positive difference. An accountant can be invaluable. They help make sure all the undeclared income is found, calculate everything correctly, tax, interest, and the penalty, often arguing for the lowest possible penalty based on the circumstances. They're crucial for organizing records, sometimes even helping reconstruct them if they're messy. Plus, they handle the actual submission and deal with any HMRC queries, which can be intimidating for individuals.
And there were actual numbers showing the benefit.
Absolutely. About a quarter of people using DDS last year hired professionals. On average, they saved £1,100 on penalties compared to those who did it themselves. And disclosures handled by accountants had 50% fewer follow-up questions from HMRC. That saves time and stress. Pro-tax accountant who arranged our chat mentioned their own clients using DDS have a 98% acceptance rate, which is well above the average.
90%, that's impressive.
It is. And we saw a case study. Imran, a small business owner. Complex situation, lots of cash involved. His accountant helped him through a big disclosure, sorting out the records, justifying things to HMRC, and importantly, setting up a payment plan he could manage.
So wrapping this up, it seems clear that whether you've had that dreaded nudge letter or you've just realized there's an error in your past taxes, using HMRC's digital disclosure service is definitely the smart move. It's the best way to sort things out, get peace of mind, and really minimize those potentially hefty penalties.
Definitely. And if the situation feels complicated, maybe involves a lot of money, or frankly, if you just want the reassurance that it's all being done perfectly correctly to get the best outcome, then getting professional help is, well, a very sensible investment.
And as we mentioned, ProTax accountants specialize in this area, guiding people through the DDS process. So if you think you might need to make a disclosure and you want that expert help, getting in touch with them will be a good next step. You can find them online at www.protaxaccountant.co.uk. That's pro-ta-x accountant.co.uk. Or you can call them on 020-8123-4567. Taking action now really can make a significant difference down the line.